He's Howard Eibach, author of 2 books on creative briefs.
And he's David Moore, a freelance creative director. And together, we are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about advertising, creative briefs, and briefing. David, today we've got a special group, a large panel of all creatives. We're going to talk shop today. So let's join the conversation. We are back with another episode of the Brief Brothers, and I'm really excited about today's episode because, well, Henry is away, and I've asked my buddy and fellow creative, David Moore, to sit in on his behalf. Henry is on the road in a time-honored tradition, taking his daughter to visit colleges. So we wish him well. And in his absence, we're doing something we've never done before. Now, David has been a sub-host in the past, and he and I are both creatives, and I think we probably have talked to a guest or two who was a creative. I can't quite remember. Maybe you do, David, but it's a little fuzzy. But this is different. We don't have just one other creative to make a threesome. We have 9 of us. So we're going to really talk shop. On the other hand, I also wanted to confess that this was an excuse for me to reach out to 3 people who were really important in my life, in my career as well. I haven't really spoken to them, but we've stayed in touch over social media, maybe the occasional call, liking something, commenting on something they posted. And each of them represents a different milestone in my career. Gene Payne is probably the oldest acquaintance and professional colleague I've known, and he and I started out together at Hoffman York in Milwaukee. I met Nic York-Bogen when she was Nic York at Team One Advertising in the 90s. So I met Gene in the late 80s. Was it 87, 88, Gene?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And Nic, you were at Team One in the mid 90s, 96, 97, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. That was right.
And then when,
Minneapolis.
and then when I was in Minneapolis, I met Monique, 2007, I believe.
Yeah.
We didn't work on the same accounts, but we sat next to each other and shot the breeze,
Yeah.
talked about this, that, and the other thing. So each of them played a different role as I advanced in my career. So I want to start with you, Gene. Why don't we take a minute and introduce yourself to our audience, and then we're going to get the conversation going. I'll turn it over to David, and he can introduce his friends and colleagues. Welcome to the Brief Brothers, Gene.
Hey, thank you. Hi, everyone. So, yes, Howard and I first got going in Milwaukee back in the day at Hoffman York, and we were a wild bunch at the time. I certainly was. And we were. I mean, it's the same story, I'm sure, for all of us. We were eager, and we wanted to win awards and be Minneapolis and everything else like that. But anyway, I was in Milwaukee for like 7 years. I actually worked at another agency, Frankenberry, Laughlin and Constable, after Hoffman York. And then I came to Chicago. I'm from Chicago. So I worked at Y&R, which is now VML, which is baffling to me. But anyway, and then I worked at DDB, and then I started jumping on the freelance track. So I mean, I've worked on. When I came to Chicago, I was working on a lot of retail. So I worked on a lot of companies going out of business. Sears and Y&R and so. But no, I worked on the usual packaged goods and all that sort of thing. And but then I've been in Chicago now for 30 years. So I've been freelancing off and on in the agency world, freelancing, and so I'm currently freelancing and lucky to be still doing my thing. I do other writing on the side. I'm something of a comedy writer, children's writer, whatever.
What's the name of your book, Gene?
We don't have to get into that, but we can do that later. But
okay.
Anyway, nice to see everyone, and this should be interesting. Nice to see you, Howard. Look good for yourself, and
yeah. Well, we like to tease Jane. He's got the best hair on LinkedIn.
No, not today. So, but so don't look.
Well, Gene is being a little modest. He is an Effie Award-winning writer, and he's also got an amazing book out, which I hope we can draw him out and have him talk about more. But it's good to see you, Gene. I'm glad you could join us. Nick
Too
was next on my career trajectory. I moved out to Los Angeles, and when I met you, Nick, you were, I don't know how long you were at Team One. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days?
Sure. Glad to. And you look fantastic. You haven't aged barely any time. It's amazing.
My new best friend.
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you.
So I started my career at Fallon McGilligan in Minneapolis and was grateful to just be surrounded by probably some of the greatest creatives I've ever worked with. I mean, you work with Bob Berry and Sally Hogshead and Mike Lascarbo and yeah. So I had the privilege of working with some really smart people. And I'd say as it relates to briefs, I just have to like Rob White. I don't know if you've ever worked with him or he was the one that really just taught me a lot about a good brief. And it was just, yeah, I mean, as it relates to what you do, I have to put a plug in for that because it's an incredible thing to craft a brilliant brief. Anyway, so from there, I went on to Team One Advertising, and that's where I met you, and of course, met my husband Matt, which was a bonus part of the job. And then from there, I went on client side because our New Zealand client, I don't know if you remember Sarah, but she tapped
Yes.
me to actually, yeah, Sarah in of her own right has gone on to do some pretty incredible things. Sarah O'Hagan, but she tapped me to become the creative director at Virgin Entertainment. So that was the beginning of my trajectory into the client side of things. I did a little work for DDW. I kind of went there for a little while and worked on some stuff there, but then continued primarily to go client side. And that has been an incredible experience, really. Being on the other side and hiring agencies has been really interesting. And most currently just wrapped up a global position at Nutrilite, which is a global vitamin supplement company. We were tapped to come in and do a global restage for them, from soup to nuts. So it's been incredible experience to see agencies present work and obviously briefs and lean into that whole conversation. Side note, and I didn't tell you this in the email, I was this close. I actually had your name that I was escalating to the VP saying we need to bring him in to help train on briefs. So just so you know, while you
I
were
heard
being
something buzzing in the back of my ear about that time, so that must have been it.
Yeah, so impressed to see what you've been up to. So, yeah, that was my last position, and unfortunately, we did everything we needed to do, and then the company all decided to move the plant and operations to Michigan, and I was not wanting to go to Michigan from Los Angeles. So,
No, I get that.
yeah.
Just a quick question. Are you doing any voice work still?
I do, yeah. I actually, I don't know if you remember, did you ever do any work with Dan Hughes?
No.
Oh, okay. He had launched a company. I did some VO work for him. It was really I can't remember what it's called now, but anyway, yeah, that was fun.
I was impressed when you told me that was something you were pursuing. I mean, we're all in the very competitive industry just in advertising, but to go into voice work, I know one or two other people who've done the same thing, and it's pretty niched. So I'm glad you were able to.
Yeah, and it's gotten hard. I mean, my gosh, with the internet, there's so many people and so much talent out there that it's super competitive because before it was like you get an agent, there's a few voiceovers. Now it's just, a lot of different people that can record from home. And yeah, it's a whole different industry, obviously.
And with AI, there's a thing called
Mhm.
11 Studio 11 or 11 Studio, something like that. You record 5 minutes of your voice and you can do your entire, I'm going to do
Yeah.
an audio version of my memoir with my voice, but it won't be me reading it. I'll just read 5 minutes of it and it'll take my voice and read the entire book in my voice.
It's
And
crazy.
you won't be able to know it's anybody else. So it's
Mhm.
just amazing. Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome, Nick. I'm glad you could be here. And Monique is she's the youngest of the colleagues that I've known because I met her more recently. I think it was about 2007. So I don't know what the math is. I was an English major, so I need my calculator. And I followed Jean's career online. I followed Nick's career online, and I've been following you as well, Monique. So your trajectory has gone skyward. Tell us more about what you've been up to in the last few years.
Well, I am currently a creative director at Gravity Global. And Nick, it's funny that I'm working on Neutralite right now.
Wait, I brought you in. I
Did
brought
you?
Gravity in. I was the creative director that actually tapped you guys. And oh my gosh.
I'm literally looking at the brief for Neutralite right now on my desk.
Yes, you're working with Halem, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Only on the Brief Brothers.
Yes, and Jess is not on the project anymore because she didn't want to go to Michigan. So we were
That's
like,
right. I didn't want to go
yes.
Michigan either. Yes, no, we were so stoked to get you guys in.
Yeah.
I did the RFP process through you guys. I really wanted you guys to come in. So I'm glad you guys are working on it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
I know
That's
that
the world. Oh my
it's
god.
such a small world. It's such a small world. But we should talk offline about how that's going.
Yes. Any questions you have, I mean it. Anything.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
do everything I can to help you.
Okay. It's just the approval process is really difficult. It has to go through so many people. Yeah.
I mean, and yes, and as it relates back to the subject we're talking about, there's a lot of things with briefs that, anything. Call
Yeah.
me on the side. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. But sorry, Howard, you are looking great. Everybody keeps mentioning it. And I'm like, he looks fantastic. It looks like you have not aged. I don't know what you're doing. Just
It's all smoke
grinding
and
up
mirrors. You see this
babies and
background
rubbing
is
them on your
this background is fuzzy. It's just me. It's not really me.
Your skin is so moist and wrinkle free. It's amazing.
Oh,
But
shut up.
yes. We met at Campbell Methune, which was a McCann agency back in the day, and it's no more. It no longer exists. Yeah.
That's not my fault. Not my fault.
I know. It's not my fault either. And we never actually worked on anything together, but we just hit it off, right? We just liked each other. I was just like, yeah.
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 Well, we sat next to each other.
We did.
And I think it was because we didn't work on the same projects, because you were a writer, I was a writer, that we could commiserate on our aches and pains of what was going on, but didn't have to, compete.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then from there, I went to, trying to remember, I went in-house for just a couple of months at United Healthcare. And then I went to Olson, which was the big hot agency in Minneapolis.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was at Olson for a bit. And then I went to a much smaller agency that did agricultural work.
Good for you.
They did B2B agricultural work, which I thought was going to be a nightmare, but I just needed a job, just kind of a stopgap job until I found my next big job. But I ended up loving it there. I loved the smaller agency. I loved B2B. It was a different type of client. People were gracious and just so thankful. And they were like, thank you so much for working on our work and making us look better. And it was just very different from working on big, big brand names. And it just felt like I was actually moving the needle, which a lot of times in advertising, you feel like, what am I doing? There was no point to anything. There's no point to this career. So
I agree. I've worked at a B2B shop, and it's like, give me the choice between Toyota Earth Movers and Coca-Cola. I'll take Toyota Earth Movers.
Yeah.
More
Absolutely.
creative opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from there, I went to kind of where I am now. It was another small agency called Morse Code, but then 2 years ago, it got bought out by Gravity Global. So
Didn't you do a stint with Margaret Murphy at Bold?
Oh, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
I completely forgot. Yes. I was only there for 7 months because I really, really missed it here. So I came back to Morse Code. This current office, I've been here longer than this is probably the longest job I've ever had. I think I've been here about 9 years. So it's just good people. I enjoy the work. So.
Well, this is my crew of people I've known over the course of my career, and I'm grateful that they could be here and have this conversation. David, why don't you introduce the rest of us to your crew?
Certainly, we've got an interesting group of four here, two of whom I've worked with, and all I have met in person except for Sara. But we're going to start with the person who is physically closest to me and that I really don't know much at all. Lisa, introduce yourself.
Hello, and I'm happy to be here, I should say. Thanks for having me. So, interesting, I guess, segue for me, Monique. You mentioned agriculture, and that's actually one of the focuses of the agency that I work for, which is Swanson Russell. So, it's I would say, medium-sized agency that's been around for 60 years. I'm in Nebraska, so I think I might be mentioning a couple of very unique things about my path that is different from what I've heard so far, which is one, I'm in Nebraska, which isn't the hotbed of advertising, but I grew up here. I got a job at Swanson Russell right out of college as a designer. And 20 some years later, I am still here. So I am a boomerang at Swanson Russell. I did leave for a short time because who works at one ad agency their entire career? So I checked out the other side, and there was a lot of great people, good clients that kind of lured me back. So I've been back for 17 years now. I am an executive vice president here. So I'm on the executive team. I've worked my way up from intern to the top level. My official title is a director of creative development, which is sort of agency responsibilities plus a creative director on a lot of accounts for Swanson Russell. And our focus is, serving clients with sort of a work and play outdoors focus. So we represent agriculture, green industry, so turf professionals, golf course professionals, and things like that, construction and outdoor recreation, lots of outdoor fishing and shooting sports and things like that. So yeah, I think I will bring an interesting perspective because I've found a great place that I really love with a really great culture and a lot of great clients that haven't really pushed me anywhere else. So I'm happy to be here and offer my perspective, and it's great to meet y'all.
Just realize the connection between you all. So Sara, you've been a judge. Mike, you've been a judge. Derek, you've been a judge for the AAF Awards in Nebraska. Lisa and her agency have been the beneficiaries of your judging and have won a lot. So anyway, Sara, next, go.
And okay. I'm Sara Rosinsky. My trajectory is simpler than all of yours. I think I've only had sort of 3 major chapters. Small advertising agency in Boston, DeBona, Bornstein, and Random for about a decade. And then I ended up at in-house at Publix supermarkets in Florida. And then in 2016, I started working for myself as Shiny Red Copy, and I call myself an autonomous copywriter. And that's where I am now.
Well done. Mike Rushing, long time no see.
Yeah. I think since I judged those Addies is the last time I actually saw you. And
in-person judging we did.
Anyway. Yeah, it was probably the last time any Addie was ever judged in person, because it was January of 2020. So I'm Mike Rushing. I'm honored to be included in this group, getting great Midwest vibes. Folks mentioned Milwaukee. I went to college in Milwaukee at Marquette University. I grew up in Ohio. That's where I met David. He was living in Cleveland at the same time that I was. I kind of went back home after school, and speaking of agriculture, my first job was at a literal mom and pop agency owned by a married couple called the Hazel Baker Purcell Group. Hazel Baker ran the business, and Purcell was the creative director. And our clients were the Ohio Soybean Council and the Ohio Corn Marketing Program and the Ohio Egg People. And so the first award I ever won was a NAMA, National Agri Marketing Award, I think.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
Yeah,
I won one too.
Yeah, so so it's a bit of a homecoming. I spent a couple years there, and then I got the itch to move on. I went to a company that was formerly a package design company that was suddenly selling itself as a full service 360-degree digital advertising agency. It was called Out of the Box, which is a kind of a corny name, but was a very talented group of people who started in package design, and that was during the dot-com boom, when if you had a phone plugged in, it would ring, and it would be from some new company that would hire you to do everything, because they needed a website, they needed the front end, they needed identity, they needed every imaginable thing, including an ad campaign. So worked on that until that kind of popped, and then moved to Cleveland, worked at a shop there that was called Point to Point Communications, and then I met David Moore, worked for him at Liggett Stash Hour, till he unfortunately laid me off. But it's great. And that's the thing, full circle in advertising. You can become close friends with somebody who fired you once, and that is certainly the case with David and I. And I really appreciate that you continue to think of me for things like this. So I do appreciate that. So that move sort of opened me up to leaving Ohio. I got a call from a recruiter, like an outside recruiter, who was recruiting for an agency called Reister. It was recently called Reister Rob. Rob had just retired, and it was being renamed and rebranded just Reister, based in Phoenix, Arizona. I had no thought that I'd ever move from the Midwest to Phoenix, Arizona. I'd never been there though, and I just got laid off, and I didn't have anything planned that week. So when the guy called, I said, okay, I guess I'll take the interview. And basically that changed the course of my life. So I worked there for 5 years, 3 at the Phoenix office, 3 at the Los Angeles office. The reason for the move to Los Angeles is not an agency romance, but an agency adjacent romance. An account person working in the LA office introduced me to the woman who would eventually become my wife. So I moved out to California to be near here, and Reister amazingly accommodated that and let me sort of establish a little bit of a creative beachhead at what was a service office there. Stayed there for a few years, and then went to work for Campbell Ewald's Los Angeles office, worked on Kaiser Permanente, worked on Travelocity, did some bigger, more exciting productions, worked with bigger clients, bigger budgets, worked more hours, bigger hours. And 5 years after that, suddenly Reister, the stars aligned, and I'd always stayed in touch with the partners at Reister. They're great people. The company really made its name doing work for the Arizona Department of Health on the youth anti-smoking, anti-vaping campaign. It's really a good place to work, and they needed help in their LA office again. So I came back in 2016, I think, and here I am, creative director at Reister, Los Angeles.
Well done. Last up on my list is Derek Walker, who every time I talk to him, I have to beg his forgiveness because I brought him into a client that we worked together with that turned out to be, this will be recorded, right? A psychopath. Anyway, Derek, introduce yourself.
I owe you for that. I'm Derek Walker. I am not gonna rattle off agencies that y'all don't know. I'm nobody who's done copywriting for the last 30 years. David says it. That was our experience with that client, is the makings of a whole podcast series. It just is. But I'm just a copywriter. I own a little agency now, Brown and Browner, and that's it. I'm gonna keep it short.
Well, I would ask you to remove the word "just" from your description. You're not just a copywriter; you're a copywriter. There's a difference.
Yeah.
All right.
I
mean, I think there are a number of very talented copywriters who have been promoting their work on LinkedIn. They've written some books, and they make a powerful case, in my opinion, for how important writing is. I mean, George Tannenbaum is at the top of my list as a writer.
Yes.
I mean, he writes every day, so he puts us all to shame for those of us who don't write every day.
Don't forget. I'm so used. My job is to promote others, not myself. We started in the shadows, and I think the only reason most of us are on social media is because it's business wise. I prefer the shadows. So I'm good. I just
Well,
am. I mean, yeah.
I get the instinct and I get the impulse, Derek, because, you know, we don't get to sign our work. We don't.
No.
I've
Derek,
written,
Derek,
I've
I see.
written,
I read a lot of your stuff online. This is Gene Payne. Your stuff is really good. I'm
Yeah,
familiar.
thank you.
So yeah.
Yes.
well, I'd like to, let's do a little segue here. I'd like to ask each of you to talk about someone who you think was your best, favorite, most quoted mentor. I mentioned in an email to Gene that to this day, I still quote our former boss at Hoff New York, Tom Jordan, who's been retired for I don't know how many years. He said a couple of things that I've just never forgotten. And if I were to repeat them to you, I've actually said them many times on the podcast. They're nothing all that earth shaking, but they are true. One of the things that Tom said, and maybe you remember this yourself, Gene, Tom said to us when we're sitting around, you know, with the creative department having a meeting, he'd said, remember, draw the circle, but don't complete it. Trust your audience to figure it out. And it's not, it's ancient. It's not a new idea, but Tom said it and I remembered it. I'm sure plenty of others have said it or versions of it, but it's one of those truths that I've never forgotten. And it has allowed me to push back on clients and even creative directors who wanted me to close the circle because we were afraid that the audience wouldn't get it. So who has been a mentor to you that you admire the most, maybe you quote, that you think about? Gene, I want to start with you.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Tom, and I love Tom. He's an old friend, but at the time I certainly batted heads with him, and I remember him saying things like "It's been done" or "It's not funny," you know. Oh gosh, I don't know. You're looking for magic words of advice. I mean, Steve Laughlin and Dennis Frankenberry, they were great, and Tom Jordan, and I've worked with a lot of. Gosh, you put me on the spot here. I'm not going to be able to pull any words of wisdom. Just you just learn by doing and working with good people. A lot of great art directors and. Anyway, somebody else take this question.
Go ahead, Derek.
Steve Drongowski at Falgren Martin, well, Falgren is what it was at the time, said to a room of McDonald's franchisers, which are all millionaires. If you ever didn't know this, if somebody owns a McDonald's, they are a millionaire. And these people own 4 or 5, 7, one owned like 12. And he looked at them and he said, what you are trying to do is like you went to the doctor and you said, doctor, I'm coughing up blood, but I don't want a pill. I don't want a shot. I don't want an x-ray. I don't want a scan. I don't want surgery. I don't want anything. Make me better. He says, do you know what the doctor's going to say to you? And the franchisor looked at him. He said, no. And he goes, the doctor's going to ask, well, who do I notify as next of kin? He says, you came in here and you decided to tell us how to do our job and what you didn't want. So who do I notify as next of kin? And I just sat there and went, holy crap, because he framed our relationship beyond taking orders. And he started as an art director, but he was defending copy. And it was like, oh, so we can stand up and promote this. So that's my favorite Steve Drongowski story, other than him moving his office into a cube. But anyway, we play practical jokes at that shop. But I think that was the best advice I ever got. Stand up for the copy.
I'm going to steal that one. That's a great story. Next, who wants to share something? Someone who's influential in your life?
I'll share. I'd say the agency in general, which was led at the time by Bill Westbrook, Fallon McElligott. Every morning we came to work on the screen said, don't give the client what they want, give them what they need. And I completely, that has never left me. I'll remember that forever. I do think now now that I've gone client side, I've sort of seen sometimes it taken a little too far, where the agencies sometimes don't listen long enough. I always say to Matt, my quote when I talk to creatives that are, again, I've been client side for a long time, is I'll say, if you listen to the client long enough, they'll write the ads themselves. And
Nice.
it's so true. It's like, if you can pull out conversation from us, I guess I'm client side now, and keep pulling it out and keep pulling it out, it writes itself. So I would say that was huge for me. Pat Fallon was just, I mean, a tour de force. That man, he created an agency that was beyond amazing in his hiring. Bill Westbrook was my first creative director, and I would say he was fundamental, because to watch him champion the work and sell it is bar none the most impressive thing that I've seen. And I truly appreciate that, because as we moved into other things, I don't know if you've all worked for creative directors like this, or where they get in the fracas. It's like, someone that champions the work and guides the creative and sells it is truly the best creative director. Not a creative, because I feel like a lot of creative directors become creatives, and he just really championed all of us, and had a lot of grace in that area. So and also learned how to sell in a conceptual way to the client. We've all heard that story about, like, waiting for the clients had to wait, whatever, 30 or 40 minutes, the British Railway client, and then they entered the advertising, the agency's room to present, and the agency said, this is how your client feels when they have to wait. So let's talk about the campaign for your company. So they intrinsically presented, like in the presentation, it was shown to them the brand tension that you're having, so that was brilliant. Like, every step of the process, it was conceptually related back to the campaign. I would say, as far as an art director, to creatives go, Bob Barry, I can't word it the way he said it, and I haven't spoken to him in such a long time, but he basically was like, there's no assignment that's too small for me. I mean, he didn't say for me, because he's way too humble. But he said, there's no assignment that's too small. And I remember just going, wow, it doesn't matter what the media buy is, what the space of the ad is, it's like, take whatever it is, and you can build a great idea around it. And I almost felt like the more constraints he had, the better his creative was. And then I was partnered with Sally Hogshead for a while, and she's incredible. She was one of my first partners, and I continued to partner with her when I came into Los Angeles. She's just a tour de force. I mean, I think I learned from her absolute passion for the work, and just there's no, there's just no guardrails around ideas, and really presenting things that, from the minute you start selling the work, from the minute you present the brief to start selling the work, by the time you're done with the presentation, it's a yes. The client just goes, yes, you've led us through the whole thinking, the whole strategy, everything else. And I think both of us learned that from working at Fallon, but for sure, her tenacity and her excitement for the work and how to present was, left me. Definitely, I learned a lot from that.
Excellent. I'm going to dive
Mike.
in, and I'm going to ask Lisa, but first I'm going to squeeze in mine, a guy named Jay Schulberg, Global Creative Director of Bozell and Jacobs forever. And he taught words he said to me was, David, sometimes you have to be the creative director. You're not there to be friends. You're not there to be friends with people. You're there to tell them what they need to do. So Lisa, who's your mentor?
Oh gosh, I've had a lot of mentors, and I'm lucky enough to actually still work with a few of them. And I can't attribute, I guess, one of the things that one of my driving principles to someone in particular, but I know it came from somebody that I've learned from along the way at Swanson Russell. But I think it's just this idea that if you don't believe it, nobody will. And I think for a long time in my career, you're just trying to sell, you're trying to say the things, the script and the narrative that you want, all the right words, right? And at some point in my career, I think I just stopped trying to read the script and just presented the work or talked through it as myself and channeled all of the energy and excitement I had for it. And I knew that if I was able to represent my excitement for it, then that would be meaningful to them. And I tell a lot of the people that I work with now, when we're kind of working through how to set up concepts to share with clients or even internally, like I don't believe that clients are always buying the work. I think they're buying into your confidence in the work. And so if you have the spirit and are embodying kind of that energy to believe in what you are, what you're selling or what you're talking through, then that's everything. So it's a lot about, I think, projecting your own enthusiasm. And at some point I just kind of, forgot what I was trying to say. And now just kind of, within limits, I guess, try to let my energy be the thing that carries other people and kind of lift other people up in terms of their confidence about the work that we're doing as well.
Boy, I wish I had that advice 30 years ago. Mike.
I love that advice. I believe that too. I always say it's enthusiasm sells. That's like the key to presenting. That's what I tell people. So mentors. I mean, how do I not talk about David Moore since he hired me in Cleveland and he brought me into this panel discussion? I'm gonna save you for almost last, I think, because every single person I've worked for has left some kind of a mark on my mind that a lesson they wanted to communicate or a lesson they didn't mean to communicate, but yet still did. My boss for most of the years that I've worked at Reister is named Tom Ortega, and he is a fabulous creative. When I first started working for him, he never slept. He, and when he wasn't making the ads better, he was painting. And I always really, he had his work shown in galleries and I think from that, it's really important to not just be a advertising creative person, but just to be a creative person and just to follow your own creative instincts where they lead you. And they're going to lead you between the hours that you're working to good solutions for your clients. But, I think it behooves creatives to to just follow your inspirations and good things will happen in life. I think you have to invent the solutions that you need. I also had a boss who said, if you're not there to make friends, you're there to make a commercial. I'd say the thing that I remember the most, the one phrase that has really stuck with me came from a boss that I think was possibly the most challenging, the most difficult to work with. I'm going to not say his name. He'll probably know if he sees this though. But he left me with a quote that was the problem with opportunity is it looks like a hell of a lot of hard work. And that's why so few people succeed.
Mm.
When the opportunity is in front of you, it is not going to be easy to make the most of it and to advance what you're trying to do. And I think that's a great piece of advice. And then David, I joke because I probably wouldn't have hired me showing my book when David did. And I think as a mentor, man, I think you taught me how to write. I remember I was working on radio ads and they probably sounded like radio ads. And you told me to, I think you went into your vast stash of CDs that used to be in your office, and you pulled out a Bob Newhart comedy album and you handed it to me, and you said, listen to this, listen to how slow he talks. And that really clicked, and it was like, oh, you're just telling a story. Like, just write, just be a writer, don't be a copywriter, just be a writer. I think that was really good. And I will say, like, at my time working at Liggett-Stashower with David, I mean, I don't know how much cover you had to run with management for that creative team, because I mean, we had so much fun. And I think, like, the value of just play and playfulness in your approach to your work, it comes through. People who hate their jobs do work that feels like it was done by people who hate their jobs. And working for David, there was no way to hate that job. So
Nice. Hey, Mike.
thank you for that.
Recognize.
No, oh my God. All right, next to me is a file cabinet. And in the drawer, in the top drawer of that file cabinet, in, like, you know, it's like one of those little cubbies that has paper clips and whatnot, there's been one of these monkeys for 20 years. How crazy is that? That's so funny.
We have a story about the monkeys, but we don't.
Yeah.
Let's get to the
Okay.
rest of these.
Okay.
Monique, I want to hear from you. Who in your life do you think you can point to, or more than one person?
And I think somebody touched on this, that there are people who you'll meet very quickly in passing, and they'll say something and it will just stick with you forever. So I've had tons of those experiences, but the one person that comes to mind is actually Robert. Do you remember Robert from Campbell Methuen? Robert Clifton? He was the ECD, Robert and Gary. No, okay, well, never mind.
I remember Reed Holmes. He was the guy that I was working with mostly, so he must have come before Reed.
I think he was still there.
Really?
He was there, yeah. But it's okay if you don't remember him. He took it upon himself to become my mentor. I did not want him to be my mentor. He was constantly telling me things all the time. He was like, this is great knowledge. You really should be writing this down. And I was just like, please stop talking to me. Like, he would talk to me incessantly to the point where, like, I could not get my work done. And he was like, one of these days, it's not going to be today. It'll be several years from now. But everything I've said to you, it's just going to sink in, and you're going to be like, Robert was right. And I have to say, several years later, I find myself remembering things he said to me. I don't want to, but they have come true. I'm like, oh my God, Robert was right. Like,
so it wasn't like a bad Certs commercial. You just couldn't get the jingle out of your head.
It turns out that he actually was saying things that were correct, but I wasn't at that point in my career where it would mean anything to me. Later on, it was something that it would mean, it was something that I was experiencing, and I was like, yes, it is meaning something to me. Like, he said to me, I remember one time he said, Monique, you need to remember, because he was trying to get me to push the creative. He said, you need to remember that nobody will sign up for prints. And I was like, what does that mean? He was like, if you go to a client and you try to sell them a light-skinned Black man with relaxed hair who wears blouses and high-heeled boots and lavender clothes, who's playing a guitar or a piano, they will think you are crazy. He's like, but if you show them prints, you give them prints, and you show them what prints can do, they will instantly love prints. So I think what he was trying to say is, yes, you can do work that's on strategy. It can be well explained, but sometimes you just hit an idea that is so crazy, but so perfect, you have to give it to the client. And to this day, I tell all of the people that I mentor, all the people that work for me, I'm like, think about how you would present prints. You need to give the client prints.
I like that. It's like a vivid description or a vivid explanation of show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Which is better. I mean, show, don't tell is helpful, but that's explaining what it means.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. Because it's an intuitive experience. You can't capture. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Everyone
have
loves Prince.
I actually have Prince's tambourine in my hallway. I got it front row center. It's like it's framed. When I was
I can't top that. I've got Todd Rundgren's guitar pick.
Oh, that's good. Really good.
Oh, I'd rather have a tambourine. I can hit somebody with it.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
lose the,
I hit someone to get it.
if I take Todd Rundgren's guitar pick, I'm likely to lose it.
Yeah.
It's funny. That's like
Okay.
ball times 1,000.
That's great, Monique. Thank you. Sarah, last but not least.
I would
Mentor.
say, yes, mentor. I would have to say Stan Bornstein, who was the fellow who hired me based on the sign I had hung up in Boston's Back Bay that basically said I was looking for any type of employment. And anyway, he really gave me my start. He really taught me everything I know. Salient story that comes to mind. I was very shy of presenting what I'd written. I would write something and leave it in his chair, printed out. Or it wasn't printed, it was typed probably then, but I would just leave it in his chair. That was the way I would present. And he said, that's just not going to do. So here's what that man did. He was presenting some of my work to Harvard Magazine for like a media kit, I think it was. And the client was in the agency and he was, I was off in my office and he called me and he said, Sarah, I'd like you to come in and present what you wrote. I was so frightened that I literally thought they could see my heart beating. I was so scared. But I got over myself and now I'm happy to present. But anyway, yeah, he taught me pretty much everything.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. Now I'd like to ask each of you a question when I was putting this panel together and thinking about what we want to talk about was kind of top of mind as well, besides the mentoring. Would you say that your career has met your expectations, exceeded your expectations, or something else?
Anyone?
I will just throw out this, that if you had told me that 30 years, I started my career in 84, 85. So I'm coming up on what, is that 30 years or 40 years? 40 years.
I do math.
And I've been retired as a creative since 2012, 2011, 2012. I've been teaching since then. But if you had told me 40 years ago that I would have written a couple of books on the creative brief and taught that, I would have said, what's a creative brief? I was given these documents. I remember the traffic person, I forget the name of the traffic person, Gene, at Hoffman York. But this person kept coming around to my office and saying, how are you doing on this project? And I got so pissed at her because, like, who the hell are you? Why are you bugging me? That was her job. She was the traffic person. But I was so new to the industry. That was my third job. So I just had this document that I was supposed to follow to do the assignments, but I didn't really know what it was. So not only would I say I don't know if exceeding my expectations or met expectations is even the right way to frame it, because I started going this way and I ended up over here, but that's kind of like life. I didn't expect that this would be where I am. And man, I'm happier than I've ever been. I'm having a blast. So what about you?
I mean, I think I can dovetail off of that because I agree. I think like when I started my career, given where I'm at, I probably would say it didn't meet my expectations because when I started out, I mean, I felt like, wow, here I am surrounded by all these superstars, and who am I? Obviously, I was good enough to get a job there and good enough to get a job at the second place. But I think I always viewed myself in context of agency side. So I think since I didn't pursue that, I went client side. I took a trajectory as well. So for me, you know, my past started off like the, you know, award path, and are we going to end up at con, or, you know, that kind of stuff. And, you know, I had a little dabble in that here and there. And obviously that was a lot of fun, getting some of those awards. But uh, I think once I went client side, that was where I hit my sweet spot. Like, I really enjoy being client side, and it has far exceeded my expectations. And I'll put it in context of just, you know, the experience of it. I feel like, wow, we get to learn so much about so many products. And because of that, we get to learn a lot about life. Like, we laugh, my husband and I laugh, and we say, wow, we can go to a cocktail party conversation, and I mean, go to a cocktail party and we can almost strike up a conversation with anybody, because we're like dangerous enough that like we know a little bit about most every subject to be dangerous, but it's rich. Like, we as creatives, and then going client side, it's been an amazing experience just to learn about the products and people. And like, guys were talking about agriculture earlier, like I've just recently did deep diving into farming practices and global farming practices and the efficacy of science of vitamins and supplements and wellness. And like, that alone, where can you get that? You get a peek behind the door of these companies that are sharing their trademark formulas, like the secret to their sauce. And to me, it's just fascinating. And obviously, with our job comes travel and, you know, meeting all these people on set. And so I would say it's far exceeded my expectations, especially in the global role that I had as global creative director. I never, ever dreamed that I would be a global creative director, ever. And so, like, even when I was the creative director at at Virgin Entertainment, I remember the guy came in to do my voice, like back in the day where we had phones, you know, at the office where there was actually messages, you know, now it's all like, but I had him record my message. You've reached Nic York, the creative director of Virgin Entertainment. And I was just like, really? Oh my gosh. And I called Matt. I'm like, listen to this, Matt. Listen. You know, I never dreamed of that. So again, once I pivoted to going client side, I think that was where it really was what I was always meant to do. And I've got to help shepherd agencies that come in to present that are, you know, phenomenal agencies that I never thought I would be getting to speak to their work, you know, and help guide them. And I've loved being that, because you can look at what I've been agency side, so you can go, hey, I'm going to help you sell this to us. So let's have one-on-ones and help you sell it. So anyway, it's just a great career. I mean, gosh,
remind me to not play Trivial Pursuit with any one of you.
Facts.
Yeah. I mean, if there's any way to describe what our careers are like, we are, and this may be true with other professions, but I would say it's very true that we are part of a profession that makes us all Renaissance people. You've got to know lots of things, at least a superficial knowledge of lots of things. Yeah. And that's wonderful. I mean, how many opportunities, how many other careers? I'm sure there are others out there, but then we get to execute ideas to solve problems. That's fun.
Yeah. Lisa, as a person growing up in Nebraska, what were your expectations? Did your career meet it?
I mean, in some ways, I don't know that I can answer that question. I feel like, I mean, 20 some years into my career, I just feel like I'm kind of getting started, and maybe that's normal in some ways, but I think it kind of comes back to that confidence thing. I think for so long, you're learning, you're watching, you're kind of, you know, intimidated, you're just kind of absorbing it. You're surrounded by so much talent. And then I feel like my career really began, like I said before, when the switch flipped for me and was like, no, like I'm the one that can do this now. So I think I'm certainly love the career that I've picked. I love it more when I talk to people who aren't kind of in a creative field and I hear about what their day looks like. And just somebody mentioned play earlier. I mean, as stressful as it is, right? I do think just working in an environment where your mind gets to play all of the time, and that being the expectation, I do think is a gift that really synced up well with who I am and how my mind works. But equally, I am just excited for what's still ahead. I mean, I think I just want to keep going and see what else is out there, and hope, ask me, maybe we can get this group back together in 50 years and we can all talk about whether or not it really met expectation, right? But yeah, I mean, I'm loving it. Certainly. I think it's great.
Henry has told me that he plans to retire and get on his boat and sail around the world. So 50 years David might be in the permanent other brief brother. So, but that would be kind of fun. I would be 117. And I definitely would not look this good. Derek.
Oh, what?
What?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your career. I mean, you have been plying your trade, your skill as a copywriter for a long time.
I've had no expectations. I came from Pizza Hut into advertising, corporate side. I worked 13 years at Pizza Hut. I look at ad people and go, you don't know what work is. When you're on the playground, you don't have expectations. You're too busy playing. Mike brought up playing, and I've been playing for 30 years.
I love it.
I used to tell my boss, I worked in-house at the Radio Shack agency, and I would tell Barry King, I'd go into his office and go, fire me today. Why? Because I'm going to do some bad things. I'm going to do some very bad things. Go ahead and fire me. Go ahead, call HR and get them ready. And he's like, really? Oh, yeah. And the spot ended with Howie Long knocking the teeth out of Terry Hatcher, the script we wrote. And I'm chuckling because, some of y'all are looking in horror. Howie Long is a professional football player, big man. Terry Hatcher's a skinny little woman. So she believed in the spot we filmed, she believed she could hit Howie. She was supposed to pat him on the back to get his attention. So as we did takes, the hits got harder until she hit him so hard, for a second he whirled and he went full football mode and he spun, and we caught this on camera. And Terry recoils and Howie catches himself and he goes back to Mr. Nice Guy, soft and cuddly. And all of us had that screenshot of Terry and Howie in that interaction. So after that, every spot I wrote for them, it would have. And then Terry was spitting chiclet, which is Hollywood for spitting teeth out. And Barry would say, oh, I love this phrase. Terry Hatcher's an American icon. Why would you have her spitting her teeth out? Because it would be so funny, Barry. And it's those moments of sheer joy. They may not be politically correct. My art director calls me from Radio Shack and he does his best Steve Irwin voice and he goes, every boy needs a dingo as a pet. And that's how he calls me, because we had a TV script that had a joke about a boy owning a dingo, a wild dog. How do we get to have so much fun and then have expectations? I'm just happy to be the fact that somebody wants to pay me to do this. Oh, dear God. Half the time I would have done this for free. Yeah, I know I don't do that. I'm sorry, I forgot it's recorded. No, I will not do this for free. I charge a lot of money. Okay, anyway, equity. I want equity now. Anyway,
yeah.
But no, I've been fortunate enough to not have any expectations, so I'm not disappointed, and I'm never satisfied.
I love that. Who else? Who wants to chime in before I call on you? The teacher that I am. Sarah?
I think I have met my expectations because when I worked at Publix, I was given opportunities to take on a management position. And I thought, I don't want to do that because then I'll be in meetings instead of getting to write. And so I've remained a writer and I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I'm having the time of my life. I don't like you. I mean, I just don't think I've ever been this happy. So can't beat that.
No, you really can. You know, and I think back to a point in my career after I left Hoffman, New York, I went to a B2B shop in Milwaukee, little one, and I got called to the carpet by my creative, not by my creative director. He came and told me that people walked by the office and saw me with my feet up on my desk, because that's how I thought. Pad of paper. This is before everybody had a computer. Put my feet up on the desk with a little pad of paper, and I was sketching out ideas. And we had glass offices back in the day. And accountant folks and other folks would walk by my office. So what is he doing with his feet up on his desk? Doesn't he have a job? My creative director completely understood, just said, I just want to let you know, you're cool. Don't worry about it. But people think you're goofing off. Because I just didn't understand. Because that's how I thought. But I was just, you know, as Derek said, I'm having fun coming up with ideas to sell a lawnmower. You know?
Yeah,
I think the word I think the word is joy, and we don't
Yeah.
use it enough. Because joy doesn't mean I'm happy. I'm joyful, even when it's hard. You know, because it's something I enjoy. And I use the word to define the word, and that doesn't work. But
Well,
I
I
think,
like what you're saying, Derek, because it's about, you know, happiness comes from the outside, joy comes from within.
yeah. So I think a lot of us don't realize that we're joyous in doing this. You know, people, when I said that to some young copywriters and art directors, the first words out of my, well, you're never unhappy. No, I'm joyful. I may be complaining and everything, but I don't want to go back to Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I like where I'm at. I'm good. And I think that's the word we need to get back to, is it's a joy to do this.
Yeah. You
A
know,
word
some
I'll
of
use-
you,
I'm sorry. I just, a word I use often is rich. It's a rich experience. And there's times where it's like, oh my gosh, we've lost electricity on set. What are we going to do? And then it's like the dopamine rush of figuring out the solution is just like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose millions of dollars. Like, what do we do? And then all of a sudden it's, oh my gosh, there's some brilliant guy behind or woman behind the scenes who's just like, I haven't met before, that's figured out the solution. And it's like, bam, like it's rich, full of experiences.
I love that. If the shark hadn't caused so many troubles for Steven Spielberg, Jaws would never be as good as it was.
Yep.
Exactly.
Because it fucked up. Yes, you
Mhm.
can swear. You can swear on this podcast. Don't worry. So those kinds of things that happen that are not supposed to happen or they're unexpected often force us to do what we do best, which is solve a problem.
There's a problem with expectation. I started my career, I had no expectations. And then as you hit all these marks, you suddenly, that's great. So then you expect it to happen again. You know, I want that feeling again. There was a time I was sitting in a ballroom in a hotel in Atlanta with the art director. We had come up with this grand idea, and there was a crew assembling a 50-foot wide video screen. It was like 10 feet tall. There were about 10 of them working all night. And we were sitting there watching. We sat around in a room and thought this up, and somebody's spending thousands of dollars to make it happen. I think, you know, that was just crazy. Why can't we do that anymore? But anyway, yeah. So every time you hit a big mark, then you want something. You get the dopamine rush. You want it again. But I feel like now in the arc of my career, I've got to a point where, yeah, I just love doing what I do. I don't have to have any of those big moments anymore.
Mike or Monique or Jean, you want to jump in?
Yeah.
I want you to ask me that question in 10 or 15 years. I want to see if I still have a job, if AI has not taken my job.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to tell you right now, AI will not take your job. AI is a system built on Boolean logic, and it requires a human being to tell it if it's done anything well. We are in a human emotion business. AI can never be human.
My dad, can I give you this quote? My dad,
Yeah.
I lost my dad in July. And he
Sorry to
said
hear.
that he said this to, one of the quotes that always stuck to me was, the creation can never explain the creator. He said, no better, it doesn't, you want an answer about God, but you are the creation. And I think it's the same with AI. AI will never be able to explain the totality of what a human being is and the beauty and the majesty of it. I'm sorry. I'm right there with you. I think
I agree.
Good to great copywriters and art directors and account service people and media people will always work.
Learn to use that tool to your advantage. Learn how to ask it the right questions, and it'll actually help you. And you can and because right now it's still hallucinating and making shit up.
I saw a great meme the other day, and it was basically like when you know, artificial general intelligence, you know, becomes full scale. Here's the last person who will still have a job, and it was a picture of Rick Rubin, the music producer, the one who says, "I don't play any instruments. I don't know how to read music. I don't know how I do what I do." All he has is good taste. And he goes in with these artists while they record, and he tells them whether he likes it or not. And that's all he does. And I think
Simon Cowell is the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly, it's like, I think that's, I mean, there is such a craft to writing well, but there's a greater craft to thinking well. And I think, you know, as much as like I am currently, I was gonna say to Derek, like, I need to remember that joy thing more, because I mean, I'm taking a break from a week. I got briefed on we have a new client opportunity on Friday at 2 p.m. last Friday, and they need spec campaigns tomorrow. That's been my week. I've been sleeping about 4 hours, you know, and it's good to remember that. Like, I think it's not my quote, it's probably Luke Sullivan, but it's like, there's a line that's just like, a bad day at an ad agency is better than the best day a bank ever had. And
yeah. Monique, are you seriously concerned about that?
I am. I really do think that people can't actually tell the difference between good writing and bad writing. Like, it's cheaper to do bad writing for client, like, or just to do straightforward writing. I don't know that people care as much about the craft. I think AI and strategy and targeting are eating up a bigger and bigger piece of the pie. And when you really hyper focus, like you target somebody, really, really, really hyper target someone, you don't really have to be creative. Like, you don't have to stand out from the crowd, because you're talking exactly to the person that you want to talk to. So you can just say, hey, you, buy these oranges, buy this purse. You don't have to have a creative message that makes you stand apart from all the other messages. I actually do think it's a real thing. Am I imagining this?
Good stuff, David.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's David Moore.
He's Howard Eibach.
And together we are the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye-bye.